runners are what I would go with. So that's what I recommend here on this trail. But obviously, don't necessarily go out there with something you've never used before. Try it out because, man, that's not the place you want to get out and get stuck and realize something is going wrong. But all right, cool. So that's a good discussion on boots, but it's a very important element. Obviously, it's what gets you from A to B. So inside the boots, we have socks. I brought darn tough socks, and the amount of socks that I basically brought 2 per day.
Perfect number.
I brought 2 per day, but again, I was only out there for 3 days or 2-day stretches, and then on the day hike stretch, I still brought 2 pairs of socks. Just I like to bring socks. Even on a regular day hike in the high peaks, I'll still bring 2 pairs of socks in my pack. They weigh nothing, and why not? But for the most part, I pretty much had about 2 pairs a day, and I would have brought less if it was in the summertime, but a lot of the trail that I did, it was not the summer, so stuff was not drying, and definitely would not dry on my backpack if I just kind of, my socks got wet and I changed them and just draped them across my backpack as I hiked. They would not have dried. So that's why I had to bring a few extra pairs of socks. And again, socks weigh nothing, but they can make the world of difference to have fresh pairs of socks. I also needed 2 pairs of socks that were not wet to sleep in at the lean-tos each night because the temperatures were down into the 20s. So that was another reason why I brought more. But if I was to go in the summertime, around now, if I was doing a straight through hike of the trail, I'd probably bring 4 pairs of socks. That's probably what I would bring. You have enough to just constantly rotate and then keep dry in the back of your pack as you hike each day, that sort of thing. How about yourself, Kenny?
I think 2 per day is really the magic number. Of course, it depends where you're through hiking. If you're going to be going out west and doing the southern portion of the PCT, there's people that go out there and they bring like 3 pairs for a week, and they just occasionally rinse them out and drape them over the back of their pack because they'll dry, basically instantly. Around here, I think 2 pairs is the magic number. I really do. I'm one of those people that I don't really like my feet to be overly warm at night. So I'm a big fan of bringing a pair of sock liners if I have to wear socks in my sleeping bag, because it kind of gives the illusion of having warm feet, which in turn makes you not think about having cold feet.
Sure.
If I put on a pair of darn toughs or something like that, unless they're ultralight runners, they're going to sweat bad in my bag, and I'm just going to be uncomfortable all night. But yeah, it's not a bad idea at all to bring a pair of sleep socks as well, because a lot of people do get cold toes, and if you're one of those people, it's going to affect the way that you sleep, which is going to obviously affect the way that you perform during the day.
Totally. And yeah, and if you're in warm conditions and you can easily just rinse your socks out in a river and drape them on your backpack, that's obviously the ideal scenario. We did not have that scenario when I was out there, except for like one section could I have done that due to temperatures. But yeah, warmer the temperatures, obviously that's what I would recommend. So if I was to do a summer hike, I'd probably bring 3 to 4 pairs, probably 4, just I like to have the socks. Shirts. So I brought 2 shirts and I would just flip-flop them each day, different shirt, then wear yesterday's shirt, rinse it in the water. Tech Wick shirts. Although I had 3 shirts for some of the hikes that I just did that were the winter temperatures, and I brought base layers for that, and then the Tech Wick shirts as well for the warmer temperatures. So I kind of had I was all over the place as far as shirts go, but for the most part, if it was the summer in particular, I would just bring 2 shirts and just constantly be flip-flopping one to the other. But again, due to winter camping, it kind of throws a wrench in the works in that really enjoyable element of not having much with you. But yeah, that's what I brought on this trip. How about yourself?
I like to have 1 shirt per day, but it depends on how long I'm going to be out for. If I'm going to be out for several days, I think 2 shirts is fine to flip flop. Something like, and I don't really mind smelling bad when I'm on trail, as long as I don't smell too offensively. So what I'll often do is bring a shirt that I hike in, a shirt that I sleep in, so I'm not basically destroying my sleeping bag. And then I'll put my my disgusting shirt back on when I hit the trail again the next day. Unless I get rained on, then I'll just whip it out and then start the flip flopping at that point.
That's a very good idea. Very good call. You have your hiking shirt and then your hanging out shirt. Smart move. And yeah, you're going to smell on the trail. Man, are you going to smell? Especially with those Techwick shirts, man. They smell so bad. I always feel so bad. I always feel so bad for people who are hiking with me or pass me on the trail when, it's like, I've only been out here for 2 hours. I put so much deodorant on. I'm telling you, dude, it's the shirt, man. It just smells so bad. I'm so sorry.
Well, if you stink and you're practicing good hygiene, that means that the shirt is doing its job. It is pulling all that moisture and bacteria away from you and just sharing it with everyone around you rather than just holding it against your skin. So, that's the silver lining of offending people as well. I'm out here to hike and this is actually a hygienic process.
That's exactly what's happening. That's how I put it down too. So moving on, underwear, I just brought 2 pairs and I swapped them each day. And if possible, rinsed them in the water, wring them out. They tended to dry pretty nicely. And again, I hiked a lot in the winter. So actually it was pretty cold while I was out there, but the warmer days, I could just rinse them in the water, wring them out, and they were pretty good next day. So again, lightweight, 2 pairs, swap them every day. That's what I went with. And now moving forward, though, this is more of due to my section and the dates that I went. So I had to still bring a mid-layer, puffy hat and gloves because some of the temperatures, as I mentioned, were in the 20s. But then they were in the 80s on my last section, so I kind of saw the whole gamut of temperatures. But for a lot of these sections, I had a mid-layer, which I hiked in and then slept in as well. Just a regular EMS mid-layer coat. And then I also had my puffy, which was for walking around the campsite at night and sleeping in because, it's cold out there. And then a hat and gloves. But that, again, is due to my situation. If it's the summertime, I wouldn't recommend bringing any of that stuff due to just having more space in your pack and less things. I could understand if you want to bring a mid-layer. It's never a bad idea to have an extra jacket just in case it can get... I mean, you probably would be good to have a mid-layer if you're out there for days at a time just in case, as well as your rain gear. Obviously, that goes without saying. Bring your rain gear, or at least your rain coat. Probably don't need rain pants, but rain coat would be good. And as far as pants go, I just brought 1 pair of pants that I always hiked in. 1 pair of pants I just wore every day, and then at the campsite at night, I slept in base layers because base layers are good to pack. They're small, they weigh nothing, and they're good bang for your buck as far as space, weight, and warmth. So I ended up sleeping in sometimes 2 pairs of base layers, which were great, nice and toasty, and then I just put the pants on back in the morning, and which also unzipped to shorts. So sometimes I had shorts, sometimes I had pants, good bang for your buck. And those are the clothes that I brought with me on the Northville-Placid Trail. And now we're going to get to the gear, the more interesting stuff, gear. And this is where Mr. Kenny Kendall shines. We're going to get right into tents because I know Kenny is chomping at the bit here to talk tents. So I have a Crua hybrid tent from Crua Outdoors. It is a 5-pound tent, so it's definitely not an ultralight tent. It's a 1-person tent. It's a hybrid, so it can be a hammock, can be a tent on the ground. That's what I have. And as far as tents go, there are just so many options. And if you're hiking the Northville-Placid Trail, it's a great idea to have a tent with you because there's so many campsites that you can sleep at, and it really opens up the possibilities of places you can stay. Whereas if you don't, you have no choice but to make it to the next lean-to, and sometimes it's not a problem at all, and sometimes it will require at least a 24-mile hike to Silver Lake or from Silver Lake. So talk to us about tents, Kenny. Give us the whole gamut of different options for tents. I know you know a lot about this subject.
So, let's go with the term shelter. I think it's going to be a little bit more appropriate for this. So there's a couple different philosophies in mind. The first thing you have to consider whenever you're on a hike is will you be carrying all of your gear with you all of the time, which obviously in a through hike you are, or will you be using a base camp? So like, would you be throwing up your tent somewhere in Johnsbrook Valley and going out and tagging the Great Range and coming back to your camp or something like that? So that's going to definitely affect the type of tent and especially the weight of the tent and the packability of it that you bring with you. So, and I'm reverting back to the tent term, sorry. So you've got tents, shelters, tarps. Okay, we'll use tarps for that. Hammocks, and then of course lean-tos, which if you have the option to just use lean-tos, and if you want to roll the dice and count on one always being available, obviously that's the most light way to go because you're not packing a shelter with you. So I like to personally, I'm big into freestanding tents. I like something that I can use as a base camp, that I don't have to leave my trekking poles behind to keep it upright. I am a big fan of tarps in certain conditions in certain places in the U.S., but in general, I don't love them in the Adirondacks because they don't do anything to keep the bugs off you. So there's a couple things right there. A lot of people nowadays are starting to lean more towards hammocks, and there's a zillion different varieties of hammocks. You can go like a normal Brazilian style hammock. You can go with a backpacker's hammock that actually has kind of a bivy / mosquito net bug shelter thing either attached to it in like a box formation or draped over the top. And even with going back to the tarps themselves, are you going to be using a tent rainfly as a structured tarp, or are you going to be using a single tarp sheet and hanging it at like a 45-degree angle, pitched between two trees, with or without a ground mat? So there's so many options out there. My personal favorite setup is to use an ultralight backpacking tent. My tent weighs about 2 pounds on the nose for a 2-person tent. It was a Big Agnes tent that was made specifically for REI co-op members a couple of years ago. So my minimum trail weight is about 2 pounds on the nose. It's double walled, which to me is really important because it helps manage moisture and condensation inside the tent. I replaced the factory tent stakes with some smaller, lightweight titanium models. Trim back all the guy wires on a little bit because they'd come with like, an astronomical amount of cordage and rope that you're never going to use in most conditions. So that's my personal go-to. If you're going to be going somewhere where you're maybe walking in, setting up your tent, and then you're going to go do your exploring until it's time to move to the next camp again, you can get away with going with something a little bit heavier. You said your tent weighs about 5 pounds. For modern backpacking,
it's 5 pounds, which is for long distance hiking. It's a heavy tent. It's a really nice tent, but it's heavy in that regard.
So that sounds like it was actually probably a pretty appropriate decision for you to make because, like you said, you were encountering winter conditions, and the tent weighs, it's in the 4 or 5 pound range. It's probably a 4-season tent, so it's probably designed for that.
Yeah, it is.
So if I'm going to go out and go winter camping or winter backpacking, I'm probably not going to take one of my little ultralight setups with me. I'm probably going to go with something a little bit more substantial. I have an EMS TriStar, which is getting pretty old now, but that's a 4-season tent that I actually got lucky and picked up from a REI rental sell-off. It was still brand new. It had been in their rental bin for about a year, and I picked it up for $40. It was a $500 tent. So, look and see what you can find out there. Don't be afraid to call around your local gear shops and ask when they're going to be selling off their rental gear or, getting rid of their last year's stock, and you can hit the sales before the sales or get employee rated super sales, which is even better. So that's my tent go-to. I always prefer something double walled. I like something self-standing. If you don't necessarily want to have a self-standing tent, but you like the idea of having something either double or single wall that is an ultralight structure, there's some companies out there that make some really cool stuff. There's the Tarp Tent Company, which I believe is tarptent.com. They've got a whole variety of different sizes and style tents that are all very lightweight, made of great material. You can call them up and they'll actually work with you on specifications to some extent. There's another company out there called Hyperlight Mountain Gear. Now, they're not cheap. And actually, I wouldn't even say they're really affordable, but they do make some really, really nice stuff that weighs like nothing. So one of their products is called the Hyperlight Mountain Gear Echo 2 system. And this is a 2-person double wall tent It's not completely self-standing. You do have to use your trekking poles, or you can purchase from them a couple,